It's time for another book special, and this month I'm counting down my top 19 human monsters from Stephen King's bibliography. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is a place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. Now normally at the moment we're going through the movies and adaptations of Stephen King's work chronologically, but once a month I do a book special, and this is this month's book special. And as I said in the intro, I'm going through my personal favourite human monsters from Stephen King's work. Now I'll get onto that in a moment, just a couple of quick plugs first. Basically everything to do with plugs, you'll find links in the description, links to my Stephen King quiz book that I published last year, some of my fiction, my newsletter, all of those things. If you're at all interested in supporting any of those, checking any of them out, have a look in the description, you'll find the links there. And yeah, any support you can offer would be much appreciated. Okay, let's get back on to the special. So as I said, we're talking human monsters. Now this was actually suggested by Stuarty Mac right here in the comments on this page. Now they came up with the idea of the most evil human antagonists in King's work, and I've sort of shaped that more into a ranking, obviously featuring 19 of them. So this is my favourite 19 human monsters from Stephen King's work. So thank you to Stuarty Mac for suggesting this. And if you've got suggestions of your own for future specials, then let me know in the comments. Who knows, I might pluck it out of the bag at any given month and just make it for you. That would be fun, wouldn't it? So this ranking is going to be spoiler free apart from the first two, but I will make sure that there is a chapter in the description so you can jump past the first two if you don't want to. It won't be a massive spoiler, but just in terms of being able to talk about those two in particular, it does give something away of the plots of those stories. But everything else I'm trying to keep as spoiler free as possible. It is just a ranking and it is just celebrating these bad people. And of course, let me know your favourite or scariest human monsters in Stephen King's work in the comments as well. I'd love to hear from you and swap some ideas around. Okay, I think we're good to go. So let's jump into it. Here are my top 19 human monsters from Stephen King books. Okay, so just as a reminder, numbers 19 and 18 do have some slightly spoilery things. So if you want to skip those, then find the little timestamp in the description to take you to number 17, and everything else will be as spoiler free as possible. Okay, last chance. Right, number 19 is Ramona Norville from Big Driver, which is in Full Dark, No Stars. Now, even though I've said this is slightly spoiler territory, I'm still not going to spoil quite why Ramona makes this list. It's difficult to do this in a sort of spoiler-free way. Basically, there's a twist around her that is quite shocking, and actually it's a story that has plenty of human monsters, and for her to end up being the human monster that I take away from this, I think shows quite how deliciously evil she is. So yeah, Ramona kicks us off. Okay, at number 18, and again, if you're still here, this is a slight spoiler, just giving you a final warning, but at number 18, we're going to the dead zone, and we're going to Frank Dodd. Now again, I'm not going to explicitly say why he is the human monster, but fuck, he is a human monster. And he is such a monster that his monsteriness goes beyond the dead zone. It features in other later Castle Rock books as well. If you've read this, you'll know why he's a monster. But like I say, I'm trying to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, so I can't really spoil anything else. But just know he is a bad person, okay? Right, I think we are properly in spoiler-free territory now, so let's jump in. Number 17, we're going to 11/22/63. I'm taking quite a small character, Frank Dunning. Now, if you don't remember, if you've read the book and you don't remember, Frank Dunning is the dad of the caretaker who is a student in Jake's night school class, who writes that really harrowing story about the night that his dad came and murdered everyone else in his family. That dad is Frank Dunning, and Frank Dunning becomes the sort of test for Jake when he goes back in time to see what effect changing the past has on the present or the future. And yeah, I mean, it's no spoiler to say that Frank Dunning kills his entire family. He is one sick, twisted, evil son of a bitch. And he's very worthy of a place in this list. So there he is at number 17. At number 16, we're taking two at the same time. It's a twofer. We've got Todd Bowden and Kurt Dusander from Apt Pupil. Now, Kurt Dusander, easy pick really. He was a Nazi. He was quite high up in the Nazis. He killed a lot of Jewish people. Todd, well, Todd's a dark, dark young man. Just like this story is a dark, dark, twisted story. And they are both very worthy of being in this list, and I don't think one deserves to be higher than the other. So I've grouped them together. Todd and Kurt in at 16. At 15, we're dipping into the Green Mile, but not one of the people behind bars. It's Percy Wetmore from the Green Mile, the absolute twisted, sadistic member of the prison staff, who's arguably the most terrifying person in this entire story. And when you consider that you've got a bunch of murderers behind bars, and he's not a murderer, that is quite something. But yeah, Percy is a horrible bully character, and, well, very worthy of a place in this list once more. At 14, it's Joe St. George, the husband of Dolores Claiborne. Now again, I'm keeping this spoiler free, but when we learn quite what he has done in this story to members of his own family, yeah, he's an easy pick for this list. Okay, at 13, we're dipping into one of my least favourite King books, and The Talisman. And generally I hate all of the characters in this book, but Morgan Sloat / Morgan of Orris is a quite horrible human monster and quite terrifying presence throughout this book. Particularly again as he is like the sworn enemy of someone who he's supposed to protect and supposed to be a very close friend, almost family of, in terms of our lead character, Jack Sawyer. But Morgan's presence is just this constant source of threat throughout this book. And particularly when he's Morgan of Orris, yeah, he is quite something else. So even though I hate the book, had to include him in the list. Okay, number 12, we're going to Lacey's story, and we're picking up Zach McCool. The first of a couple of toxic fans that are in this list. And yeah, I mean, again, trying to keep this spoiler free, so I won't go into too much detail, but there is one scene in particular with Zach McCool and Lacey that will burn itself into your brain forevermore and fully justify him being smack in the middle of this list. So yeah, Zach, you're sick. At 11, we're going to Christine, and we're going with Buddy Repperton, the leader of the Greaser Bully gang, and one of King's best Greaser bullies generally. He picks on Arnie because he's an easy target, but he gets his comeuppance, really, doesn't he? Even trying to keep it spoiler free. I mean, Christine just takes out pretty much everyone. And yeah, Buddy's just a great character. He's that classic King Greaser bully that you don't want to mess with. He's probably got a switchblade in his pocket. He's going to fuck you up. But when he gets his just desserts, it's very satisfying. Okay, in at number 10, and quite possibly one of the most fucked up human monsters in King's work, is Brady Hartsfield from Mr. Mercedes. I mean, again, we're keeping this spoiler free, but it's not a spoiler to say that Brady is the guy driving the Mercedes at the start of this, that just plows this car into a queue of desperate, jobless people, kills a load of them, including babies and other things, because we know that from the start. We know who it is. And we get in this cat and mouse relationship with Bill Hodges. But Brady is twisted. Talking twisted, in at number 9, is Chris Hargensen from Carrie. I mean, she is off the scale, evil, nasty, scheming, and just horrible. I mean, everyone is horrible to Carrie, but Chris Hargensen is the boss level horrible. And I mean, yeah, she genuinely terrifies me. In at 8, we're going under the dome, and we're going for Junior Rennie, somebody who does some quite dastardly things very early on in the book. And even though maybe later he does some sort of redemptive things, there's no getting away from what he does and quite what's going on in his head. Yeah, Junior Rennie is scary. He deserves to be in this list. At number 7, we're staying under the dome, and we're staying with the Rennies, but we're going with Big Jim instead. One of the most realistic and therefore particularly scary political villains King has ever drawn. He is a big fat fish in a little pond, and he sees the dome as a chance to control power. And do some really dastardly things. Have I said dastardly already? I can't remember. I probably have. It's a good word though for this list, isn't it? Yeah, Big Jim. He is a bastard. At 6, someone who is in the short story Nona, who is in the novel Needful Things, but who we meet in the body in different seasons. Of course, I'm talking about Ace Merrill. Again, one of King's archetype bullies, probably only bettered by one more who is yet to come on this list. I mean, yeah, an 18-year-old angry man, young man, who targets the weak, and it's just terrifying. And what's interesting with Ace is that when we see him as an adult later in Needful Things, he's still a horrible bastard of a bully. And yeah, he is terrifying once again. And there's a theme here, isn't there? I think, arguably, the people on this list are probably scarier than King's supernatural monsters. There's one for you. Let me know what scares you more, King's human monsters or non-human ones. At 5, going into Holly and Emily and Roddy Harris, the characters that kind of prompted this suggestion from Stuarty Mac in the first place. And yeah, they are twisted enough to be right in at the top 5, despite this book only being out a few weeks at the time of recording. Again, I'm keeping this spoiler free, so I'm not going to say exactly why they are so high in the list. Read Holly and you'll find out. But considering these are like 2 old academics in their 80s, let's just say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Right, and number 4, it's Norman Daniels from Rose Madder. Now, you could make the case that he is too over the top, too much of a cartoon character. But he's also really fucking scary. He mercilessly hunts down his wife, and God help anybody who tries to stand in his way. And he doesn't even need weapons. Let's just put it that way. No, he is scary. At 3, we're going to It, and we're going to King's ultimate greasery type bully. It's Henry Bowers, of course. I mean, what is there to say about Henry Bowers? He is quite possibly the most terrifying bully I have ever read on a page or seen in an adaptation. And in a book where you've got Pennywise, who can take the shape of your darkest fear, I think there's a good chance if I lived in Derry, Pennywise would take the shape of Henry Bowers. That's how fucking scary and twisted he is. And he doesn't really mellow with age either. Yeah, Henry Bowers. A brilliant, brilliant character, and someone who I would never want to meet in my life. So in at number 2, we're going back to the Dead Zone, my all-time favourite King book, and we're talking Greg Stilson. Yes, it turns out that Greg Stilson basically has become reality in terms of, he's basically Donald Trump, isn't he? But King wrote this years before we really knew who Donald Trump was. And in many ways, Greg Stilson is a bit more terrifying than Donald Trump. Let's just hope that Trump doesn't get back in power so he can follow through on the Stilson vibe. But going back to Greg Stilson, like, the first time we meet Greg Stilson, he kicks a dog to death for no reason whatsoever. That tells you right away what sort of person he is. Even if you're a cat person, that is extreme. And while he doesn't get any better from there on, he is, to call him a bully just seems a bit fair on Greg Stilson. He is vile. He is evil. And yeah, he scares the hell out of me. But of course, when it comes to the number 1, when it comes to the number 1 human monsters, well, it has to be Annie Wilkes from Misery, the number 1 fan of Paul Sheldon, his nurse, his captor, his saviour, and possibly somebody who he might never actually be able to escape from. I mentioned there was another toxic fan in the list. Of course, that is Annie. And I think that's testament to Annie's character, is how well she stands up even now. She's so recognizable as a archetype of a fan character. There will be people out there who are very much like Annie Wilkes, but in terms of her on the page as a human monster, she is absolutely horrifically terrifying. Scarier than probably all of the other 18 people on this list put together. There is just an intensity and an unpredictability about her that just adds extra levels of danger. And yeah, she was a shoo-in for the top of this list. She was the first person I wrote down when I started compiling my list, and everyone else just sat below her. So well done, Annie. Put the axe down. You are top of the list. Okay, so there we go. There's my ranking of my favourite 19 human monsters from Stephen King's work, but let me know what your choices are in the comments. I'd love to hear who I've missed, who you disagree with, or who you agree with. Let me know, get involved, and let's chat in the comments. A couple of things to plug before I wrap up. Well, I say a couple of things to plug. Just check the description. You'll find links to my newsletter, my quiz book, my fiction, the Constant Writers podcast, my Letterboxd profile. All of those things you can get involved with, and any support would be much appreciated. And if you want to come and say hi on Instagram and chat human monsters, supernatural monsters, anything to do with Stephen King, I'm at Dave Musson. That's it for this month's book special. Do come back for the next one, because we're back on the movies and adaptations. And yes, we're actually doing it. We're doing an episode on Golden Years.